This is our final global studies project on human rights in Australia.
What are you saying?
Australia adopted the Aborigine law to force Indigenous children to forget about their heritage and live in a white society. After this happened, there was violent attacks and children were being jumped and killed. The government then set out a No Child Left Behind rule, which means you had to let children on transportation to keep them safe and get them to their destination, even if they didn't have money for the fare.
Children in Australia are not able to have large celebrations involving their culture without being rudely interrupted and harassed. Even though they have become more accepted, they still get interrupted while having cultural festivals, including camps and children programs. 32% of all prisoners in Australia are Indigenous. Many others are being arrested and getting separated from their family and getting an unfair trial just for being in the area of crime.
Indigenous families are facing unemployment, lower standards of health, and lower standards of education, and problems finding housing. Australia roughly has 1 million Indigenous citizens that have inhabited the land for roughly 6,000 years, but track record below national averages on most socioeconomic measures and suffer disproportionately high rates of suicide, domestic violence, and imprisonment.
The main struggle is poverty. Indigenous people are free and equal to all others and have rights to be free from any kind of discrimination, including discrimination based on their indigenous origins or identity. Indigenous people have the right to live in freedom, peace, and security. Indigenous people generally experience lower standards of health, education, employment, and housing. They are overrepresented in the criminal justice system and the care protection systems nationally compared to the non-Indigenous people.
To many Aboriginals and Torres Strait Islander Australians, there's little to celebrate and is a commemoration of a deep loss of sovereign rights to their land, loss of family, and loss of right to their practice of culture. That is why, and those are the main reasons why Indigenous people struggle so much to live their lives peacefully in Australia.
Around 1,200 men, women, and children who sought refuge in Australia were forcibly transferred to a remote Pacific island nation of Nauru. Suffer severe abuse, inhumane treatment, and neglect. Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International said today. The government continues to ignore that they aren't provided with most basic needs and are put in bad environments. Most are in dire medical conditions. Refugees struggles because they are not treated fairly and struggle with racism, discrimination, community attitudes, impact of disrupted education and schooling.
The main struggles refugees face are language barriers, housing problems, access to medical services, cultural differences, raising children, prejudice, and racism. Many refugees and asylum seekers have multiple and complex physical and psychological health issues resulting from trauma and torture, deprivation, and prolonged poverty periods in migration detention, and poor access to health care.
The end.